And good evening from downtown Covington at Link NKY World Headquarters. I'm Michael Monks alongside Mark Payne, Link NKY politics and government reporter. This is our continuing coverage of primary election 2022. Tonight's forum features the Republican candidates for House District 69, incumbent State Representative Adam Koenig. Representative Koenig, welcome. Thank you for being with us this evening. And Erlanger City Councilman Steve Doan. Councilman Doan, thank you for being with us as well. As you have watched over the past several days, our live forums feature questions from Mark Payne and I to the candidates, who will then have 1 minute to respond. We start with opening statements and then proceed through a series of questions. Should one candidate mention the other candidate, we will offer that mentioned candidate the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. So we will have opening statements, few questions, and then closing statements. And again, full coverage of election 2022 is available at linknky.com. We have articles about all of the races taking place on May 17, primary election day, at linknky.com, as well as op-eds submitted by the candidates themselves, so you can hear why they are running in their own words. And so we will start with our opening statements this evening with State Representative Adam Koenig, the incumbent Republican of House District 69. Representative Koenig, you have 1 minute to start.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to Link NKY for doing this, not just for this race, but for all the races across Northern Kentucky. It's been my honor truly to represent the people of the 69th District in Frankfort for 16 years. And it's a tale of two careers almost. First 10 years in Frankfort under a Democratic House, fighting the first Bashir administration and Greg Stumbo and the Democrats that ran things. And since then, 6 years that we've been in charge, we've done a great deal of things to improve Kentucky, pass conservative legislation like right to work, prevailing wage repeal, pro-life legislation, tax reform, workers' compensation reform, election reform, public assistance reform, school choice, putting our pension systems on solid footing. And the list goes on and on, but we've done quite a bit. Some of those things I've been the sponsor of, some of them I've just been in the Army marching along, and proud of it. So I would like the ability to represent the citizens for another 2 years because I'm a proven conservative with proven results.
Thank you, Representative Koenig. Erlanger City Councilman Steve Doan is a challenger in this race. Councilman Doan, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you, Michael. As previously stated, my name is Steve Doan, and I'm running for State House of Representatives here in the 69th District. I grew up in Erlanger, where I still reside with my wife, Chelsea, and our 9-month-old son, Wesley. Over the last 10 years of my career, I've served in all three branches of our government. From a statewide role as a general counsel in Governor Matt Bevin's administration, as an attorney litigating on behalf of individuals in the judicial branch to protect their freedoms, and as an Erlanger City Councilman here in the legislative branch. I'm running for one reason, because we need more voices in Frankfort that will put the freedoms and liberties of people over the corporate special interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Doan. And we will alternate between the two of you, who answers first, who answers second, and we'll do that throughout the evening. I've got to get my paper here to make sure I keep track of that throughout the duration of this forum. But now we'll get started with our questions. And I'll ask the first question, which will be addressed to Mr. Doan, and then we'll proceed to Mr. Koenig. And this is a question that we're asking of a lot of the legislative candidates in this year's forum series. What is a Republican? And it seems that question is playing out in this particular race pretty heavily. So I'd like for each of you, in our opening question here, to take the opportunity of what is a Republican, because we hear a lot about what a conservative is, or what a constitutional conservative is, or what a patriot is, or what a rhino is. And I would like to hear from each of you what that means to you. Mr. Doan, we'll start with you. You have 1 minute.
Simply, a Republican first and foremost fights to uphold the Constitution, and not just the federal Constitution, but the state Constitution as well. A Republican is also for less government, more freedom. I think that's probably the most critical issues that you would see come from a Republican. You could also say that a Republican would fight to lower taxes to make sure that there's more efficient government that does more with less. That's how I would see a Republican being categorized in today's environment.
Thank you, Steve Doan. Adam Koenig, your response.
I mean, I agree with largely what was just said, but you know, there's a big tent of Republicans in Frankfort. There's several Eastern Kentucky representatives, and I think they would agree with this statement, with whom I agree on pro-life issues and basically nothing else. But we all are elected, registered Republicans who come together to create a coalition to pass the things I just mentioned. And not everybody agrees all the time, and that's okay. There's a cadre of people who are convincing others to run in this race and other races that have a very narrow view. And if you don't subscribe to their narrow view, then you're not a Republican or a real Republican. And that is I mean, you can go that way, but you're not going to have a governing majority. You're not even going to have a majority. And I've learned in my 16 years in Frankfurt, if you're not in the majority, you don't get to make policy. So I view the Republican Party as a big tent of people who have different views, not all of them the same. I think I represent Northern Kentucky views extremely well, and I think the voters have shown that they agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. You're watching Link NKY's coverage of primary election 2022 in Northern Kentucky. This is the Republican Candidates Forum for House District 69. Our candidates are incumbent State Representative Adam Koenig and challenger Erlanger City Councilman Steve Doan. I'm Michael Monks alongside Mark Payne. I now yield the floor to my good friend Mark Payne for our next question. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to Councilman Doan and Representative Koenig for joining us tonight. My first question is going to be on election and security. Secretary of State Michael Adams has repeatedly said we have some of the safest elections in the country. Furthermore, two bills, Senate Bill 216 and House Bill 564, were passed this legislative session, and they further strengthen election integrity in Kentucky. Would each of you talk about your stance on election integrity, and if familiar with either bill, discuss your thoughts on each? And Representative Koenig, we're going to start with you, and you have 1 minute.
Thanks, Mark. You know, I was happy to support both those bills, as well as a bill a few years ago to require voter ID at the polls. There's a lot of concerns out there, and we can always do better and be looking for ways to do better. And we did that this year with making sure that early voting was limited. We go back to the old rules around absentee ballots, no sending out of ballots to anyone and everyone, as occurred in other states. A host of things, paper ballots, paper trail, 24/7 surveillance on drop boxes and those ballots, just to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and we have a clear trail. And there was no credible accusations of widespread fraud in Kentucky, and yet we took it upon ourselves to go forward. Michael Adams has done a great job. And, you know, I was proud to support those things and look forward to seeing them implemented and make sure that they're done properly.
And Steve Doan, the floor is yours. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. You know, I believe a national and a local discussion into election integrity is a positive step forward, you know, for our state, locally, as well as our nation. You know, over the last two national elections, both in 2016 and 2020, you know, both the Democrats and the Republicans claimed that the elections were rigged. So I think that this legislation that we've passed is a good step forward in securing our elections. Big supporter of requiring IDs at the ballot, and having a paper ballot backup would be a very good thing in our state. One thing that I think we could go further in is looking at new technologies to make sure that we are providing secure elections. I would be interested in office in looking into blockchain technology or a secure fraud-proof form of technology to make sure that there is no fraud and that we can actually verify everything going forward.
Thank you both. Primary election day is May 17. We've got information on where, when, and how to vote at linknky.com, or please contact your local county clerk. They have all of the information available. There have been a lot of changes for folks on perhaps where you might go to vote, when you can vote, and all of the up-to-date information is available at linknky.com, but also through your local county clerks. On Tuesday, May 17, 2 weeks from yesterday, we will have live coverage of the results as they come in, live from right here in our studio, and also live reporters on the ground at the 3 county courthouses here in Northern Kentucky. So stand by for that coverage as well. Our next question comes from me, and this is about charter schools. We saw House Bill 9 pass the House and then the Senate. So it was approved by the General Assembly. It was vetoed by Governor Beshear. And then that piece of legislation was overridden by the General Assembly. It's related to charter schools. And Louisville and Northern Kentucky were targeted by this legislation for a charter pilot program, which means we may soon see a charter school in Northern Kentucky. We're not sure where, we're not sure when, but it does appear that it will be somewhere in the urban core of Northern Kentucky, either Covington or Newport, based on what we know at this point. I want to know from each of you your thoughts on the charter school legislation, what you hope it accomplishes, or what concerns you might have about it. And for this question, we start with Steve Doan. Mr. Doan, you have 1 minute.
So let me begin this conversation by saying that I am a huge supporter of the Erlanger-Ellesmere School District. You know, having attended that my entire educational career, K through 12, and then this year, you know, sponsoring the jerseys for the middle school soccer club. And I don't think Adam and I probably disagree too much on this issue. You know, I am for charter schools and for more competition in education. And we've always had competition here in this district. You know, you have a lot of kids that attend St. Henry, specific to Kenton County. You have St. Henry, you have Erlanger-Ellesmere School Districts, you have Dixie, and then you're going to have the Boone County School Districts. You've also got kids that go to Cub Latin and Cub Cat, you know. So I think that more competition, having dollars follow students is always a good thing. And, you know, but I also think that we need to continue to support public education and make sure that our schools are properly funded and do away with a lot of those unfunded mandates and make sure that they get the proper funding they need.
Thank you, Steve Doan. Representative Koenig, your minute starts now.
Yeah, I was happy to support not just this year's charter school bill, but the one passed by my friend Representative Carney in 2017. Look, there are 44, I believe it's 44 other states in the District of Columbia that have charter schools. And we hear the sky is falling, that the world is coming to an end if we pass this. And that's just not the case, because that's not the case in other states. It's easy to point out bad actors, and that's done regularly, but there are a lot of success stories. And certainly no one, even every charter school supporter, I can't find anybody in the legislature who doesn't see and believe in the importance of public schools. My brother is a teacher at Dixie. Although I went to Koenig Catholic, my 3 brothers all went to Dixie, and they got quality educations. So it is a matter of giving parents choice, giving them options. Competition is a good thing. It works in higher education, and I believe will work in the rest of the education sphere as well.
Mark Payne is Link NKY's politics and government reporter. He spent the entire 2022 legislative session embedded in Frankfort, living down there and getting to know our lawmakers well, and also covering important legislation for Northern Kentucky readers. And he has our next question for our candidates this evening. Mark? Don't forget to unmute yourself. That's strike 1 for you, Mark. We'll see how many I add up to.
It will hopefully only be 1 tonight, Michael. So the legislature passed House Bill 3, the omnibus abortion bill, this session. Currently, there is a temporary injunction on the bill to prevent its implementation. The Supreme Court signaled via a leaked draft opinion that it would overturn Roe v. Wade, which would trigger the fetal heartbeat bill in Kentucky, effectively ending abortion in the state. Would each of you give your stance on abortion and your thoughts on both pieces of legislation? And I believe we are starting with Representative Koenig for that question.
Well, Mark, my stance on those pieces of legislation were pro because I was able to vote for them, as well as several other pieces of legislation in the 6 years the Republicans have held the majority in Frankfurt between the House and the Senate. Was happy and proud to do so. And not just that, but this year we will have the ability to, via constitutional amendment, vote on whether or not there is an inherent right to an abortion anywhere in the Kentucky Constitution. So, and we had you talked about the fetal heartbeat bill. We have a trigger law that if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then I believe we've become a abortion-free state. And that's why I've been endorsed by Kentucky Right to Life. They see a 16-year record of supporting these issues, and I'm proud of it.
And Steve Doan, you have a minute for your answer.
Yeah, I'm also 100% anti-abortion, pro-life. I received the endorsement of Northern Kentucky Right to Life. I think that we've done a good job here in Kentucky moving the needle to stop abortion, to be pro-life. And, I'm really excited about the potential of this Supreme Court opinion coming out, which will trigger that law that Mr. Koenig was talking about, which would allow us to be a completely abortion-free state.
All right, moving on to our next question. We've been hearing a lot about infrastructure at the national level with the big bill that was adopted by Congress and signed into law by President Biden. And now we are starting to see some plans play out here in Kentucky. And the 69th district includes Dixie Highway, major thoroughfare in the region. Of course, the entire region is impacted by the Brent Spence Bridge, and there are a lot of other issues around the region. What I want to know from each of you is, if you are the 69th district representative over the next 2 years, what do you still see as the biggest infrastructure challenges in the region, and what would you do to address them? We'll start this question with Steve Doan.
Yeah, so I probably live on what may be the busiest road in Erlanger, Commonwealth Avenue. It's a direct corridor right to the interstate. It comes in and out of the heart of the city. I think probably specifically within the district, the biggest issues are, Richardson Road, right? It's falling off the side of a hill. Constantly have issues, accidents on that. You look at Turfway Road, right? There's more potholes on that road than I can count. And Houston and Dixie aren't too far off. So what we need to do going forward with infrastructure is we need to look at changing the funding mechanism for our roads. We need to make sure that we're having car counts so that we can actually get the proper funding and change those mechanisms down in Frankfurt. With the gas tax not being passed this year, which I oppose increasing the gas tax, we're going to need to find new creative solutions to fund roads, and I would see us cutting some government programs to make sure that we can get that happen.
Thank you, Steve. Adam Koenig, you have a minute for your answer.
Well, certainly. Look, I was proud this year to get the money in for the rehabilitation and rebuilding of Stevenson Road. That should be completely let within the next 2 years, and hopefully finished within 3. To get it into some decent shape and the flooding issues that we deal with, and also by hopefully within a year, the rebuilding of an expansion of Houston Road to the old cinema property, which is obviously a huge economic development issue within Erlanger as well as Florence. And thank God we have Sal Santoro in southern Boone County, who writes the road plan now. When I first got elected 16 years ago, the most common thing I heard was, when are we going to start getting our fair share back from Frankfurt? Well, good news. We're not getting all of it back, but we are getting more money than we have ever seen come from Frankfurt. And that's thanks to Sal, myself, and the others in Northern Kentucky, Senator McDaniel, running the ANR in in the Senate. So, but to get specifically to your question, obviously, the biggest issue is the Brent Spence Bridge. And we are on a path to do that with no tolls, but it's going to be a long slog, and it's going to go from, it's not just the bridge, it goes from I think back to Dixie Highway and Fort Mitchell, all the way up in 3 or 4 exits on 71 and 75 in Ohio. So it's going to be a long trek, and we need to make sure that's done properly.
You are watching live election coverage from Link NKY. I'm Michael Monks alongside Mark Payne. Tonight's forum is the Republican candidates for State House District 69, incumbent Republican State Representative Adam Koenig and his challenger, Erlanger City Councilman Steve Doan. Full coverage of elections, campaigns, and races all across the 3 counties at linknky.com. We hope you got the new edition of the Link Reader in your mailbox, our print edition that comes out every 2 months. We have sample ballots in there for Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties so that you can be prepared when you go to the ballot box. Reminder to check out linknky.com or your local county clerk's website for details on when, where, and how to vote on May 17. And we'll have live coverage that night as well. I turn the floor back over to Mark Payne for our next question.
Starting on January 1st, 2023, the income tax will drop 0.5% until it's slowly phased out. While the legislation will slowly rid the state of income tax, it widens the tax base in certain areas, such as adding a sales tax or a user fee for car rental services like Uber and digital services like Airbnb. Would each of you talk about your stance on income tax? And I believe we are starting with Representative Koenig on that one. 1 minute.
Yes, and I'm supportive of the direction we're going. I voted to lower the income tax in 2018 from 6 to 5%. And I voted for and co-sponsored this year's bill that puts us on the glide path to getting to the point where we ensure that we have enough revenue to do the things we need to do. We ensure that we have an appropriate amount of rainy day fund before we continue to lower the tax rate. But yes, January 1, we're going to go down to 4.5%. So that's a cut of 25% in everyone's income tax. And you just have to look at Florida, Texas, Tennessee especially, and see what a 0% income tax can do to your economic development. And I've always run as a pro-business Republican. We want jobs. We want people to be able to live the American dream with a good job. And we want people to be able to take care of themselves without having to live off of government. And this is one of the many things we've done in order to make that happen. I'm fully supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. We'll turn now to Mr. Doan to answer that question. Steve, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I applaud our legislators for instituting a long-term plan, for transitioning our state away from an income-based approach and in towards a consumption-based approach. The biggest distinction probably between, us and Tennessee, Florida, and Texas that were mentioned is that they have great tourism, and our tourism just isn't what they have. So it's going to be really important for our legislators over the next few years to monitor the changes in our budget, to make sure that we're passing policies that are going to support increased tourism and expand the base of individuals that are coming to our state to make purchases. At the same time, we also need to be a watchdog on our tax dollars. We need to make sure that we're not nickeling and diming our citizens and increasing taxes on services, over the next 10 years in order to make up for budget shortfalls. So while I'm very supportive of these transitions, we do need to monitor them. We do need to watch them and not just kind of let this thing go forward. We need to pay attention.
Thank you both for your answers to that question. Let's talk about cannabis. We've seen many states across the country legalize it, not just for medical use, but also recreational use. There have been proposals to both of those effects in Frankfurt in recent years. Nothing has moved too far forward yet. We've even heard Governor Andy Beshear talk about possible executive action on the medical cannabis front. What we ended up with after this session was a commission to further study cannabis, and that was pushed by Representative Kim Moser, a Republican of Taylor Mill. I'm Sorry, there's a scene happening out on Madison Avenue here. It's always an adventure in downtown Covington, so it's a little loud right now. I want to know your position on cannabis, medical, recreational, and where you stand on that. And for this question, we will start with Councilman Doan. You have 1 minute.
I believe this is the first time Adam and I are going to disagree on something in this debate. I support medical marijuana here in the state. Having worked in Governor Bevin's office, I was the general counsel for the governor's office of agricultural policy. I actually got to sit in on making sure that we had legal hemp, and I spent a lot of time with farmers around the state who believe that legalizing marijuana will have a net impact, a beneficial impact towards our state, not only for their jobs, for their lives, but also for people who have injuries, sicknesses, illnesses. So I'm a big supporter of medical cannabis. I would like to see the regulatory scheme come out where it's wide open, not like in Ohio where I believe they have 5 companies that were approved charters. I'd like to see more small businesses, more of the CBD stores being able to get into that, or they have to have a doctor's prescription, of course. And then recreational, over time we could get to that. I think if you're doing this just for tax revenue, we don't tax medicine, and so I wouldn't see why we would want to put a tax on medical marijuana. So if you're going to want the tax revenue, you're going to need to legalize recreational. And that's kind of where I stand on that.
All right, Mr. Koenig, your thoughts.
Thanks, Michael. As I said on one of your programs earlier this year, we talked about this. I have not voted for medicinal marijuana, and here's why. I'm not a fan of the nanny state, but I also don't think that the legislature should be deciding what is and isn't medicine. That's what we have an FDA for. That's what we have a CDC for. And there is no other drug that you have just someone with no real experience or knowledge dispensing it and saying, take as much as you like. Here's different types, and this one might work better for this issue rather than that issue. It just seems like a terrible policy. I know it helps people. I have friends and supporters who say that it helps them, helps their children, helps their parents, and I get that. Honestly, I think I'm to the point where I would seriously consider recreational marijuana, in large part because I make arguments on expanded gaming, sports betting, casinos, and whatnot. And it's hard to differentiate those arguments and not be willing to at least consider recreational marijuana.
These are the candidates for the Republican nomination in State House District 69. Adam Koenig is the incumbent state representative for District 69. Challenger Stephen Doan is currently a city councilman in Erlanger. Mark Payne is Lincoln KY politics and government reporter and has our next question. Mark?
I'm going to jump over to the Senate. And with Senate Bill 1, which was sponsored by Northern Kentucky Senator John Schickel, a Republican from Union, it moves decision-making power in schools from site-based decision-making councils to superintendents. It would allow superintendents to make major school decisions on things such as teachers, curriculum, and textbooks. It also added language from Senate Bill 138 that requires schools to teach 24 documents recommended by the Ashbrook Center in Ohio. Would each of you talk about your stance on Senate Bill 1 with its added language from Senate Bill 138?
And we'll start with Representative Koenig on that one, yeah.
Absolutely. So I voted yes on the bill. With regards to the original Senate Bill 1 site-based council, I think it's going to be more effective for Northern Kentucky than perhaps some of the rural counties. But up here, and obviously this is who I represent, I heard from the superintendents who say, look, we've got school district, we got this district, it's a larger district like Boone County or Kenton County, and they've got kids coming from all these different schools with different programs and different curriculums being moved into junior highs and high schools. and they're all not on the same curriculum, and that has posed problems. I trust I want to put more trust in the elected officials who put their neck out there and set the policy. And I've always had issues with them hiring the site-based councils hiring principals, not that they're not well-meaning and whatnot, but when a principal in a school district, a school board member has to live up to the responsibilities and do the job, they should be able to hire the people that share their vision. So that's that part. And look, on the CRT stuff, you take every member of the legislature to write their own bill, you get out 138 different bills. I think that was the most responsible of the bills I saw. And when it was added, I was perfectly comfortable with voting for it. And I think Senator Wise did it in a responsible and thoughtful way.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. Mr. Doan, you have a minute.
So I'm not a big fan of centralizing power or decisions in one person, but I am okay with the Senate Bill 1. I think that allowing superintendent a broader range of decision-making authority is not a bad thing, particularly here in this district. I think that we've got some fantastic superintendents who can make those decisions. It does allow us a little bit more local control over what is going on in our school, and we can apply pressure to those people on our school boards that we need to make sure are doing the right things.
All right, thank you, Mr. Doan. And now I will ask my colleague, Mark Payne, to proceed with another question.
This is my last one for the evening, gentlemen, and it's going to be regarding COVID. The legislature ended the COVID state of emergency this session through Senate Joint Resolution 150. Opponents of the resolution said it would prevent Kentucky from being able to receive federal funds, and it will cut extended SNAP benefits this month. It's important to note that the state has received a financial windfall from federal funds during the COVID pandemic, such as the CARES Act from former President Trump and American Rescue Plan Act from President Biden. What would each of you have done different during the pandemic as a legislature? That was the question. Sorry, guys. What would you have done different during the pandemic as a legislator?
And we are starting.
Is that a question to me?
Exactly. We start with Steve Doan for this one. Apologies. I think we had a little breakdown. There you go.
So if I had been in office during the COVID pandemic, I would have supported the Ron DeSantis CARES package. I would have fought to make sure that our state stayed open, that we didn't go through lockdowns. I left my job and I started my own law firm on January 1, 2020. And less than 3 months later, I was subject to a lockdown. And I didn't know if I would be able to make it, to be quite honest. As an attorney, my income depends on the income of my clients. A lot of my clients are family law clients. So if they're not working, I'm not working. And these lockdowns did a lot to hurt small businesses. They hurt me. Meanwhile, the large businesses sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce and all those other special corporate groups, they continue to grow in value. So if I had been a legislator at that time, I would have certainly fought to keep our state open and to make sure that people could keep their jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Doan. Mr. Koenig, you have a minute.
Well, as they say, hindsight's 2020. I think we, as a legislature, obviously it hit right at the tail end of the 2020 legislature, and we did the best we could in passing what needed to be passed and getting out of town so as to not further spread. I mean, when everyone else is having to change their behaviors, for us to continue would have been irresponsible. And but that left us 9 months unable to do anything and leaving the governor to his own devices. That's why we passed in early 2021 bills to start reforming that system, where the executive orders last for 30 days, and this governor or any future governor needs to come to the legislature and ask for extension on those things. And it really kind of shined a light on an issue that needed to be changed. We had a constitutional amendment in order that would allow us to call ourselves back into session when there are issues, so that the next time this happens, we're not gone for 9 months at a time. We can call ourselves back in to do what needs to be done, whether it's help a governor, stop a governor, whatever it may be. So I think we went about it in a responsible way. It's easy to go back and say you could do things differently and fight something. And, there was no DeSantis plan in 2020. So, I don't know how you say that, but that's okay. There's a lot of discussion either way, but the important thing is we put an end to it this year. And we have reined in the power of this governor and future governors.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. You are watching live coverage of primary election 2022 from Link NKY. I'm Michael Monks alongside Mark Payne. Our guests this evening are the Republican candidates in State House District 69, incumbent State Representative Adam Koenig and challenger Erlanger City Councilman Steve Doan. And we will conclude our question session with this one from me. And it's really about politics more broadly, perhaps. You don't need me to tell you about the temperature of the nation and the rhetoric that we see as it relates to governance, government, politics. And we see it here locally as well as it plays out in local campaigns. And some might argue even in this one to some degree, though we haven't seen much of that this evening, thankfully. I want to know what role you see a lawmaker, say a representative from House District 69. What role do you see yourself playing, if you think it's necessary, to help lower the temperature of political discourse, civic discourse in this country, so that we might be able to better relate to one another again? And we'll start with Steve Doan with this one. You have a minute.
So, I think that politics in its nature is confrontational. I think that when our founding fathers set up this system, they were attempting to allow us to have revolution without bloody conflict. That's why we have elections. We transition our government and we turn it over. Some people don't like that. Some people feel comfortable in their spots and they want to stay there forever. We've allowed our politicians too much power. We've given them too many benefits. The idea that a part-time legislator would get a pension is absolutely ridiculous. So I think that in order to tone down the rhetoric, to tone down the fights here in our nation and locally, we need to make significant changes to the amount of power, to the amount of control, and the amount of authority that our legislators are given.
Thank you, Mr. Doan. We'll turn now to Mr. Koenig for 1 minute.
I think you saw a little bit of an example right there. I knocked on a gentleman's door a couple days ago, who was lives very close to my opponent, and he wanted to know what we're doing to fight, because we got to fight, and I understand his passion and I appreciate it. He watches Fox News, he sees Ron DeSantis doing all this stuff, and why aren't we doing it? And I very calmly explained to him, here's a lot of the things we've done. And I said, look, I like to make policy. I'd like to do media interviews, but I don't seek them out. I don't scream and yell. And he said, well, you need to scream and yell. If that's what it takes, say something obnoxious. And I literally looked him in the face and said, sir, if that's what you want, you need to vote for somebody else. I try to be straightforward. I try to be reasonable. I can be snarky in my private life, and I try to hold that in as much as I can. But I'm into making policy, and I'm trying to set a good example, whether it's my speeches on the House floor, whether it's debates like this, when it's knocking on doors and trying to have good conversations and reasonable conversations with individuals, and on social media. I'm sure you can find examples of me probably not doing a good job of that. None of us are perfect, and I'm free to admit that. And I try to learn it something every day. But I think the best thing I can do is set an example. And you know, when I know I'm probably going too long, but when I first ran 16 years ago, people used to say there's not a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. Nobody says that anymore. Everyone's got to hate the other side and throw things at the other side. And I don't think that's healthy. And this is just the pendulum swinging from one end to another. And I've tried to be consistent in the way I've acted the entire time.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. And now we will move into the closing remarks from each of the candidates. At the top of our program, we started with Representative Koenig. So here in the closing remarks, we'll start with, I meant if it's Representative Koenig at the top of the show. So Councilman Doan, you will get the opportunity to go first here. I believe we said that you each had a minute. We do have some extra time. If you want to use that here, we can give you a couple of minutes if you'd like them. Councilman Doan, the floor is yours.
In closing, I feel that our district is ready for change. I feel that our leaders in this district are ready for change. You know, I've been endorsed by Congressman Thomas Massey. I've been endorsed by Mayor Jessica Fetty, Tyson Hermes, Gary Meyer, Ryan Elmore, Steve Nipper, Kathy Flagg. These are local elected officials. I was appointed to Erlanger City Council by local elected officials. They saw something in me. They saw a leader. I think it's time that we have a leader in this district. I think it's time that we have someone that will fight for the people of this district when they go down to Frankfurt. Ultimately, government makes decisions which affects your life. And if you're not willing to fight for people's lives, you have no business serving in the state legislature. So on May 17th, I would ask for your vote. If you'd like more information, please feel free to reach out to me personally, or you can visit my website, doanforky.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Doan. Representative Adam Koenig, your closing remarks.
Thank you, Michael. I have been a leader in this community for literally decades because the people have entrusted me with positions where I can try to improve life in Northern Kentucky. And now I get to do that not just for Kentucky, or not just for Northern Kentucky, but Kentucky as a whole. And I don't think there's anyone, and I can go through a list of endorsements of Northern Kentucky elected officials. But I've been honored with the elected officials I serve with in other parts of the state who are willing to drive up here and knock on doors with me because they know that I am a leader in Frankfurt. And given my position as chairman of House Licensing, Occupations, and Administrative Regulations, I've been fortunate enough to have an outsized ability to make more things happen and have a bigger seat at the table for Northern Kentucky and for the 69th district. The other thing I heard, I talked earlier about how we did get our fair share when I first ran for this. That was the number one thing I heard. Number two, I think I heard was, when are we going to get a casino? Well, I was instrumental in getting that bill through the House. It was a Senate bill, and I carried it in the House on historical horse racing, and we're going to see that at Turfway. I'm the leader on sports betting. I'm the leader on allowing you to direct ship alcohol straight to your house, which is something that for years people have been shipping wine to Indiana and Ohio and sending their tax dollars there. If you look at the support I've received in elections, people know I'm a leader. People know that I listen to them. And I think if you were to talk to people in Frankfurt, they'd say that there's no one who works harder in Frankfurt than myself. And I would love the honor to do that for another 2 years for you, the citizens of the 69th district.
Gentlemen, thank you both. You've been watching live election coverage from Lincoln KY. LincolnKY.com is your home for full coverage of the primary election in 2022. We have articles about every race taking place across the 3 counties. And we also have opinion editorials submitted by the candidates so that they can explain in their own words why they are seeking their local offices. And coming up on Tuesday, May 17, primary night, we will have live coverage of the results as they come in from right here in the studio, and also reporters on the ground in all three courthouses. We hope you'll tune in. Mark Payne is Lincoln KY politics and government reporter, and he will be part of that coverage alongside me. My thanks this evening to State Representative Adam Koenig and Erlanger City Councilman Steve Doan for coming on to talk and to answer these questions for voters, not just in the 69th district, but all across Northern Kentucky. Thanks to both of you for being with us, and good luck to both of you on primary night.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And we will be back again on Thursday evening with the candidates for the Newport City Commission, a big field this year in Newport. We hope to see you then. Thanks for watching this evening.